No, I'm done with COVID.
She's acting like a child.
Former New York Times op-ed editor and full-time crybaby Bari Weiss was on Real Time with Bill Maher, where she had a tantrum over COVID protections. And that clip was played for a doctor who reacted to it in a very enjoyable way. So I don't want to give too much away here because this clip is fantastic. But I also have a second clip coming up that also is a bit of a super cut, as I'll show you what that's all about. But first, here is this clip of Bari Weiss and a doctor reacting to how ridiculous Bari Weiss is being.
I'm done with COVID.
Oh,
I'm done. It's
yeah.
like I went so hard on COVID. I
remember.
Sprayed the Pringles cans that I bought at the grocery store, stripped my clothes off because I thought COVID would be on my clothes. Like, I did it all. And then we were told, you get the vaccine. You get the vaccine and you get back to normal. And we haven't gotten back to normal. And it's ridiculous at this point. This is going to be remembered by the younger generation as a catastrophic moral crime.
And Dr. Reiner, you told Bari Weiss essentially she needed to grow up.
Yeah, she needed to grow up because she's acting like a child. When you say you don't want to play this game anymore and you're going to take your ball and go home, you're acting like a child. I like the sacrifices that she enumerated, or that she stripped off her clothes when she got home and then she cleaned the grocery cans. Meanwhile, my colleagues in hospitals all around the country went into care for people dying from this virus. They continue to do that every day, man our ERs and our ICUs every day. And for the first year of this pandemic, they did that without any protection of a vaccine. That's the sacrifice they made. And all that we've done is ask the public to wear a mask when you go out and about and get vaccinated, right? So I'm glad she's done with it. But I sort of feel like this country has been in a boat that is filled with water, and some of us have been trying to bail the water out of this boat for the last 2 years. And now we have people like Bari Weiss basically saying, I'm done. I'm not bailing the water out anymore. And when somebody who is relatively young and relatively healthy says that, what they're saying is, I'll be okay if I get this virus. Screw you. Doesn't matter to me what happens to you. That's the message I get from her.
So there you have Dr. Jonathan Reiner giving Bari Weiss some much needed perspective. She complains about having to clean groceries or having to at one point do that, having to wear a mask, just general COVID protections, physically distance. She's complaining about that. Meanwhile, there are actual doctors and nurses at the heart of this that aren't with their families half the time, are in these hospitals trying to take care of these patients who are largely, by the way, unvaccinated, largely have not taken the pandemic seriously, are now in the hospitals, in the ICUs. And Bari Weiss is complaining about having to, at one point, clean her groceries. It is just amazing how selfish these comments are. That this was a New York Times op-ed editor. She wrote for the New York Times before she decided to leave and then claimed cancel culture. Just so incredibly selfish to have comments like this. And look, nobody wants to be going through this still. Nobody wants to still be having to wear a mask. Nobody wants to have to physically distance. We want to get back to quote unquote normal life before COVID-19. But the reality is this is a public health issue. So we deal with this as a society. We take these protections, not for ourselves, if we're healthy and young, but for others to try and limit the spread as much as possible. That same day that Bari Weiss made those comments, U.S. reports 3,896 new coronavirus deaths, highest since January 2021. This pandemic is not over. It's still going on. So even though your feelings may want it to be over, it's not over. Now, luckily, numbers are coming down generally, at least in the U.S. here. Reported cases have come down a little more recently over the past week or so. So it hit this huge spike with Omicron while we were all pretending it was gone. Oh, back to school, back to work, everything's normal. Meanwhile, the biggest spike ever for COVID-19. But it's amazing. People have to be able to disconnect their own personal feelings and own anger about this situation with the reality of what is actually going on, with the actual data, the actual science, and what we need to do as a society to overcome this for everyone. Now, I want to share one last clip here. This is a bit of a supercut. This was put together actually by I think it was put together by Walker Bregman, who has been on the show before. He was on with Alice Koch, just discussing the Koch network and how they funded a lot of misinformation around lockdowns. So here you have in being anti-lockdown. Anyways, I'll link to that interview above and below the video. It is a fantastic discussion, really showing you how conservative right-wing media generated this entire narrative over being anti-lockdown, anti-protection, and how it's hurt our ability to get out of this pandemic. But he put together this supercut here of Bari Weiss and some actual people at the heart of this pandemic. So I want to play just a piece of it here.
No, I'm done with COVID.
A lot of people are like, I'm done. I can't keep doing this because it's going to destroy my own health.
Oh,
I'm done. It's like I went so hard on COVID.
I sat in that room and I held his hand and I listened to 20 people say goodbye to him. And he was just one story out of thousands.
I
remember.
Sprayed the Pringles cans that I bought at the grocery store, stripped my clothes off because I thought COVID would be on my clothes.
Me. Meanwhile, these doctors in the hospital taking care of actual coronavirus patients, still in the heart of it right now, as I just showed you the deaths, the case numbers. Meanwhile, a former New York Times op-ed editor on Bill Maher complaining about her having to one time spray her Pringles cans and wash her clothes. Just amazing. One last thing here I want to end on, just this tweet from Carlos Maza, who tweeted out, Bari Weiss became the editor of the New York Times op-ed section despite being an absolute effing clown, so please stop doubting your skills as a writer. And he even follows up here saying, actually, if you ever doubted your thoughtfulness as a writer, you're already more qualified than Bari Weiss when she got hired. There you go. Something to end on there. So just incredible, the kinds of people that make it into media and spread their kind of bullshit. But it's important to have this called out. And it's also important, by the way, for a place like CNN to acknowledge this. So it was good to see. They're normally, perfectly happy to have Bill Maher and his ilk on their network. But Bill Maher, at least when it comes to this issue, many issues, but this issue and his commentary during that same episode was very just anti-science for somebody who supposedly believes in the climate crisis and the need to address it, just completely ignoring all the science, all the data, what is going on, just as Bari Weiss was.